In the Hard to Kill podcast on a Friday afternoon. If it's your first time here, drop us a like, hit subscribe, leave us a comment. I'm Dave. I'm your host, and today, if you could see by the thumbnail, doing a piece on Charlie Kirk. I didn't want to, only because I typically don't like jumping on bandwagons. I like letting the dust settle a little bit, seeing how I feel about it. But this one is more emotionally charged than I thought. For me, that is. I didn't think that I was going to really have a visceral reaction, and I do and I don't. And let me explain. My initial reaction wasn't shock, to be honest. It was almost matter of fact. And I can't watch any violent stuff on the internet. I stay away from it. I don't watch those drone strikes in Ukraine. Especially don't like watching people get killed live on video. I've had enough of that in my life in terms of actual real life visuals being in Afghanistan. I don't want to see that and toxify my mind. So I understand what happened. I get it. It's a tragedy. And it affects me in the sense that I recognize that the I want to call it the influencer space has a lot of weight. Your words matter. My words matter. I take responsibility in what I say, and I back everything that I say, and I know that I'm taking a risk expressing my thoughts openly on an open platform. I've accepted that risk, but I've also accepted the responsibility as well. And if I get things wrong, that's okay. I have enough of a sense of humility to be able to say that I'm wrong. And a guy like Charlie, although I wasn't a huge follower, I'll be honest, I understood what he was doing. I thought it was noble. It's not easy debating random people that vehemently oppose what you have to say. So I respected the craft, but again, I don't like watching contentious stuff. I don't like the phone dictating my emotions because I'll get emotional if I watch debates like that. And I'll be honest, I like to keep myself walled off from anything that's going to spike my emotions and get me fired up. I get fired up enough as is, just with what's going on in here. I don't need an external source doing that. But that being said, I want to get into a few things. I made a list of 4 points that I wanted to just express that uh, these things I think need to be said, and especially from my point of view, from a veteran point of view, and from a Canadian point of view, that uh, don't seem to be uh, being brought up. And one of the main things is assumptions. The main thing I'm seeing is that is an assumption that the assassin, whom I think they just caught him. I think they just arrested him. That there's automatically he's a left wing, radical left maniac. I haven't seen any motive. I don't know how we can assume that. And that's been adopted by the right wing. It's got to be the left wing. They're out to kill everybody in our circle. Okay. And then the left wing accepting that this individual who was the assassin was left wing and kind of cheering it on, which is a whole other show and disgusting just in and of itself. Uh, Murdering another human being in cold blood in front of his kids is just unacceptable, like full stop. So, but that's the internet. You can say what you want with zero repercussions, right? Um, so that's not what I wanted to talk about today. What I wanted to talk about were a few key points that I think are the main issues here. And I want to know what you guys think. So before I get started, I want to give a shout out to all those that are members here of the show. If you guys are not members yet, please consider becoming a member. It helps with production and ensuring that the show gets a lot more visibility. Whether it's $2.99 or more, believe it or not, it goes a long way to getting this show to the next level. And I want to ensure that you guys get the best quality guests and the best quality production value every time you tune in here. So please consider becoming a member or clicking the link here in the description to become a member of my Substack newsletter. All right. So let's hop right into the first point that I want to make. The first point I want to make on all this is that he was assassinated for what he had to say. We can likely assume that Charlie didn't bully the assassin in high school and take his lunch money. Charlie was not some king or dictator that was moving his armies into foreign lands and taking property and, raising entire villages and taking its women and children. Like, this wasn't what he was doing. So the hatred is 100% due to what he had to say. The attack was due based on what he had to say. There was no physical threat in this environment. And that being said, words cast a spell. The nature of spelling comes from spell. The casting a spell, when we actually put words out into the universe, lands on our ears, our brains process it, and that's how we start developing a sense of consciousness. Words have a profound effect on the way we think. And since the dawn of civilization, kings and queens and dictators and authoritarians try to control how you think. That's why they burn books. That's why they eliminate art. That's why they kill dissenters, because the spoken word is of utmost importance. And when an individual taps into that collective frequency, that feeling that, hey, this really feels true. I didn't realize that somebody was actually thinking the same way I was, but I hear it and that feels true. Now you're on to something. And now you've become a target for those that do not want us to have that sense of commonality with our fellow man. So the awakening happens often when somebody says the truthful thing out loud. And in Charlie's case, he was bringing up things that, for me, have been true for a long time. Family values matter. Christian values matter. I consider myself a Christian, and I've had an awakening in the last year. These are the things that I hold true that have seemed to have been downplayed and vilified over the last few years. Well, when somebody like that is really passionate about saying, no, it's okay to have these values. It's okay to think in a manner that promotes these values. What you've done is now created an awakening within a group of people that have likely not felt comfortable expressing these values. And that is inherently dangerous for any system that is trying to control you. And so the main point I'm trying to make here is that it's not a left versus right issue. And that's what I hope we start to realize. This is far from a left versus right issue. A left versus right issue is manufactured. Okay. I have more in common with the blue haired HR manager named Judy, who's an NDP supporter, than Elon Musk, Mark Carney, all of these higher ups that pull the strings behind the curtains. And that reality is something that is hard for people to accept. Your conspiracy theorist, like Trump supporting uncle, and blue-haired Judy have way more in common. But what do we feel now? We have this sense that, nope, I can't possibly have anything in common with them. I hate them. That's something that drives me up the wall. I want to have as many conversations as possible with as many human beings as possible. Today, I had a blue-haired cashier at Costco. That's interesting. I was like, hey, dude, what's up? Yeah, hey, I'm doing good, man. What do you do on the weekend? Now, blue hair is likely a sign, this is assumption, that he's a little bit on the left leaning side of things, but I could be wrong. But we can have a good conversation, even if it's at the checkout aisle of Costco. I told him, yeah, man, I'm a dad. I think I'm going to take it easy this weekend. He's like, oh, right on. I'm like, what are you up to? These are the common interactions that are normal, but have been meant to feel almost foreign. And we can see the comments on Twitter by university professors here in Canada that are disgusting, that are talking about killing more right wing people. How can we possibly bring the divide together if you feel that if I say, well, I have some issues with the trans agenda, or mm, I really don't think this whole all lives or the whole native thing where there was a bunch of mass graves. I don't think there's any evidence for that. Where I'm using rationality automatically puts me into some camp where I need to be killed. That's how you end up with the Bolsheviks. That's how you end up with Maoist China. That's how you end up with the tyrants ruling. Because if you feel that somehow my beliefs or the way I think or what I say is now reason for me to be killed or murdered, we've got some problems. So therefore, point two that I want to make is the media has created an assassination culture, and I'll explain. And if you guys are tracking here, guys, help me in the comments. Um, what do you guys think? Are we being divided on purpose? That's an important topic that I don't typically cover here in the show, but it does relate to what I'm talking about here in terms of fitness as well. That the idea that somehow fitness is a left versus right issue, you've seen it in the media. People that are deemed to be fit and healthy are automatically branded as being right wing somehow. This is what I'm talking about here. So drop in the comments if you guys feel that this is gone a little bit too far. Um, Point number two, the media has created this assassination culture. I'll explain it this way. When Trump had his assassination attempt, members of my family openly and brazenly just said, I wish they had hit the mark. These are members of my family that I love dearly. And my reaction was like, I never want to hear that come out of your mouth again, especially around my children. Are you advocating for the murder of another human being? And this is coming from my family, people that I care for, people I never thought would ever say something like that. How did we get to that point where baby boomers who have never seen conflict, who have never seen death, destruction, and mayhem would advocate for the death of a sitting president? It still rattles me that that came out of their mouths, and it continues to come out of a lot of people's mouths. And a lot of times, this is in direct contradiction to their quote unquote Christian values. I approach this mostly with love, and I do not want to judge because that's not my responsibility. But it is disconcerting, 100%. And the point I want to make here is that this follows with the years of COVID nonsense where, again, members of my family were on board with internment camps for the unvaccinated. So we've already seen the media has created this awful, toxic environment where there is a group of people that are quote unquote clean or virtuous and they're good, and a bunch of unwanted, unclean people that are deemed to be expendable and not to be tolerated, to quote my very prime minister back in the day, where Trudeau said people that hold these beliefs are not to be tolerated here in Canada. Like I said earlier, words matter. They truly do matter because they start affecting the consciousness. And those words start to rattle around in your mind and you still got to digest them. And if you get them hammered at you long enough, like a psyop, they will start affecting your beliefs and your values if you don't have a strong value-based system. And in my case, that's why I went back to Christianity, because I recognized, oh shit, I'm worshiping false idols. Oh shit, I'm judging people. Oh shit, when I do stuff, I don't have love in my heart. I need to be external of this political nonsense. And so that's my rationale. Maybe yours is different. Drop it in the comments. But it reminds me of the 2 minutes of hate from 1984. If you've ever read or watched the movie 1984 by George Orwell, there's a very poignant moment that is really eerily close to what we're experiencing these days, where every citizen had to go do a 2 minutes of hate towards, in this case, Goldstein, who was like the external boogeyman. And you had to really get into it because the agents were watching. Like, if you weren't truly expressing hatred toward this external enemy, you were looked upon as, you're pretty suspicious. Why don't you hate as much as you should? Which takes away from the internal struggle that should be happening within the state, because they've eliminated your ability to be a free human. But they justify it with this 2 minutes of hate and this big brother system that is there to look out for you, that is there to provide for you. And the reason why we have to do all this is because of that external boogeyman. And who's that external boogeyman these days? Where's the 2 minutes of hate coming from? It's the media. It's the mainstream stuff that I see when I go to my family's house, that I see when anybody typically over the age of 60 has on their TV screens. They're watching a nonstop slow drip of hatred that slowly brings them closer and closer to this idea that, yes, somebody deserves to die because this can't go on anymore. It looks like, President Biden saying, back in my day, I take him out back and beat him up, to literal pundits saying like he probably deserves a bullet. These words can't be taken back. And then to be categorized with labels: right wing, fascist, right? These are done intentionally to label the undesirables. And so you get a constant drip of this nonstop, nonstop, nonstop. And then boom, incident happens. And you go, oh shit, how could somebody do this? How could somebody commit such an atrocious act of violence? Well, if you go on Twitter these days, it's an orgy of people just wanting as much violence and chaos as humanly possible, putting people on hit lists. And the irony is, these are the people that are least likely, in my opinion, to actually be able to use violence. They're the weak people, the weak men that have no idea what violence is. They're likely not on the jujitsu mats. They're likely not the ones that were sweating their balls off fighting the Taliban and ISIS during the last 20 years. They're the ones that got the privileged, cushy life of going to university, not getting calluses on their hands, and tweeting. They're the ones that will gladly put one in somebody's dome because they disagree with them, but not themselves, though. They'll find somebody else to do it. They'll find somebody else like the terrorists, the Hamas types, the jihadis that will gladly do their dirty work, right? And that's kind of what we're dealing with here. We've got this 2 minutes of hate that's going on nonstop, nonstop, nonstop. And it's just blasted now in your face. And then when words are recategorized as violence, and we see this now, words can be seen as violent. They can be seen as hateful. Hateful is falls right into our hate speech laws. If you say something that is hateful, well, what is hateful? Initially, it was like, well, you can't say, I want to kill somebody. Okay, cool. Or a group of people. Okay. But now it's starting to morph. And in your mind, if you're like, well, words are violence, then the reciprocal action could be actual violence. Because logically, like, you're committing a violent act against me. So, which is making me feel uncomfortable. It's not physically beating me up. It's I'm saying something that confronts my belief system or somebody's being mean to me. Well, that's violent. So therefore, I have every justification in my mind because I've been told that that's the case that I can commit an act of violence, actual violence. That's what I'm saying. Words have substantial power. And then point three, the real enemy is again not Trump. It's not blue hair Judy. It's the powers that be that are pulling the strings. I guarantee you, if you go have a conversation with that person and you're like, I don't know about that guy, you'll have a bunch of commonalities. One thing I learned in Afghanistan is that pretty much everybody have the exact same fundamental wants and needs. They want to be well fed. They want to have a half decent roof over their heads, and they want to have protection and safety for their families. That's it. Now, the difference is here are how do we go about that? How do we go about getting those basic needs and wants covered off? That's where we get into ideologies. Okay, fair enough. But if you can understand that at a fundamental level and come to the conversation with like, well, they're just trying to get their needs met. Okay. And I'm trying to get my needs met. Well, then maybe we can have a conversation because we can have this common ground. Like, hey, maybe we all like football. Fuck, I don't know. Maybe we all like the Montreal Canadiens. Well, there's some common ground. You're not so bad. That's how I feel I grew up. And especially being in the unit that I grew up in, we challenged our ideas often loudly and drunkenly in the mess. And that was a hell of a good time. I never felt like I had to censor my speech when I was in the John Francis Young Club. Shout out to the boys and girls at the Canadian Grenadier Guards. That was my quote unquote safe space. There were no charge parades for being overtly racist in today's culture because it wasn't racism. It wasn't being an asshole to somebody on purpose because of the color of their skin. It was dark humor because we're infantry folks. It was expressing things out in the open and being challenged openly and then hugging it out and then going on the range together or going to war together. It was a fraternity. It was a brotherhood. And it was beautiful, honestly. It was some of the best moments of my life. But I think we've kind of lost that. I think we've kind of lost that because of the culture we've created that you have to self-censor. You have to watch out what you say. You might lose your job. You might be filmed saying something that is off color. And that's unfortunate. But who are the real enemies? Because we have to think, you have to use the Latin term, qui bono. Who would benefit from a guy like Charlie Kirk being assassinated? I'm racking my brain here, but it doesn't seem like the common man benefits from Charlie Kirk being assassinated. It doesn't seem like the left benefits. Does the right benefit from losing one of its pundits or one of its thought leaders? I don't think so. So who benefits from this? The individual that carried out the assassination, does he benefit from this? He's going to be in jail forever. And depending on what state, I think it's Utah. I don't know if they have the death penalty or not, but he might lose his life. Does he benefit from this? Does his family benefit from this? Who benefits? And whenever there's a civil unrest, when there's division, it's not the people that are fighting that are benefiting. It's the people that benefit from the fighting that are benefiting. If a war starts, if a civil war starts, are any of these leaders going to be in the labs, in the tanks, on the front lines leading the charge? Absolutely freaking not. Are the cabinet ministers going to be there? No, of course they're not going to be there. Who's going to be there? Us. Fighting it out like dummies, destroying our property, losing all of our wealth, losing our human capital, losing lives, destroying generations of built up wealth and capital. And who gets to pick up all of that wealth and all of that at a huge discount because it's all been destroyed? The people that didn't have to get in the fight. And that's been the common theme forever. You cannot fight against your common man. E pluribus unum. We have to stay together. We're together. We're significantly stronger. But the more and more we get pushed down this divisive road, the more we have to seclude into our camps, and the more we isolate ourselves, and the less of a chance we have of actually pulling this from the brink. I want essentially the government to stay out of my business. I want to be able to raise my kids in a peaceful community that has loads of opportunity for them to do whatever they want. And I pretty much have that. I often say I probably live in one of the best communities on the planet, not just Canada, on the planet. And it's not by luck, it's not by chance that I'm here. It's a succession of really good decisions by my ancestors to get me to the point where I could benefit from this opportunity. And I'm not going to let it just fade away. This is the dream that I get to live. I get to wake up, I get to have a coffee, I get to see my kids go off to school. I get to go to the gym, I get to do everything that every human being essentially wants at the end of the day. I have it. And I'll be damned if I'm going to lose it. And that's partly why I do what I do. Fitness is a vehicle to personal responsibility. I saw war. It freaked me the fuck out. I don't want war here. Those that haven't experienced war are the most likely to actively try and pursue it. And I'm telling you, if you're not a combat veteran, listen, you do not want this to escalate. You do not want more assassinations. You do not want people going down for what they have to say. That's the point of free speech. It keeps the tyrant at bay. Afghanistan is a disaster. It has been for decades. And it's because of the ideologies during the 60s and 70s that took root and destroyed a beautiful progressive country. Curious to know what you guys think. You guys, drop them in the comments here. My last point. Ray Dalio is a hedge fund executive. He created his own fund. I follow him quite closely. He's written a few books, and he's written about how empires fail, how they end. And he ties it into financial markets and the money cycle, but also internally, what does this look like? In his book, Principles, which you should go check out if you're interested in this kind of stuff, his model for the rise and fall of empires uses a few models. He uses the Dutch, the Romans, the Americans, and the French as case studies. Now, the Dutch still exist. The French still exist. Obviously, the Romans are a little bit different. But he lays out the point that every empire goes through a few phases. They start become super productive, and they start to rise. And they get super prosperous, and everybody's happy. But then it gets to a point where the pie, so to speak, isn't growing anymore. So those that have start to get more. So it's the Matthew principle. Those that have will continue to get more, and those that have not will continue to have less. And because of that, divisions start to happen. And because of that, more conflicts start to happen. The state starts to weaken. Once the state starts to weaken, other competitors start realizing this is an opportunity and start taking shots at that state. The way he outlines it now is that the political gaps now in the US have essentially become almost unmendable. They're too far apart. And in Canada as well. I think that the divide now between like liberal and conservative it echoes what's going on in the United States. If you just look at what's going on in Twitter, as if that's a microcosm of how people feel, frig, man, it's not good. And that being said, once you end up in this position, the inevitability of a culture war, which is what we're in the middle of, creates the loss of trust in institutions, because ultimately people are realizing, either consciously or subconsciously, that they are not getting as much of the pie as they should, for the amount of labor that they're putting into the market. And then they go, well, that's your fault. No, no, no. The other side said, no, 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 that's your fault. So this is the left-right divide. But think of who would benefit from causing that divide to be even wider. It's not the people on the left and the right, it's the people at the top that have the bigger pieces of the pie. And so the left wing isn't wrong when they say, like, man, like capitalism is crushing us. Like, what's going on? We're not getting our just desserts. Yeah, you're kind of right. And the right is on point where it's like, well, we can't keep on giving out all these handouts to people for welfare programs. Like, I work hard. I don't want it to go to people that aren't working hard. They're right as well. But it's coming to that middle ground, like I talked about, that would end up creating that divide to close. Realizing, wait, it's not between me and you. It's between us and them. And until that realization happens, I don't know if we're going to bring our countries back off the brink, because I think this is some serious shit we're dealing with here. It raises some awareness on my end about what I'm saying, and I know I'm not nearly as popular as Charlie Kirk ever was. I'm not trying to pretend that, or any other of the commenters out there that do YouTube or podcasts, but there are comments that I see that are really out there, man. Accusing me of being like a right-wing MAGA supporter. Okay. What's your evidence on that? Because I don't even know what that means. I can't vote down in the United States because I have a more conservative point of view. That makes me, quote unquote, make America great again. What does that even mean? But you can see how the psyche of people starts to flip, that automatically I have people that are more right of center on my show. Well, he must support this. And then you get siloed, you get put into a box, right? And if this is how we're going to continue to be, then it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. That being said, it's just going to lead to more violence. And violence begets violence, because having fought in Afghanistan and seeing the violence that's happened in the Middle East, we knew with the Hearts and Minds campaign, you kill one dude, maybe by accident, a father, you've created 4 or 5 new radicals that will gladly go over to the Taliban and pledge their allegiance so they could kill as many of the guys like me as they could. Because I don't know if I'd be better than that if the roles were reversed. If I was minding my own business and some occupying force killed my children, and the day before I was like, yeah, you know what? Live and let live. Just don't bother me. I'm not picking a side. I think I'd pick a side pretty quickly. So that's where that compassion, that ability to understand the other side a bit better is truly important, because you don't know what that other person has gone through to get to this point. You don't know what I've gone through to get to this point. Then that's where that mutual respect has to be in place. So I'll just end with this, guys. Charlie Kirk, from what I could see, was a noble man. He put his thoughts out there, which is always dangerous. But at the end of the day, I think he came from a good place. He was trying to mend the divide between left and right. His actions speak louder than his words. Actions are what you need to judge somebody on, not their words per se, but what they actually do. And he showed up, man. It must have sucked being in front of all those people, calling them names, being just an asshole to him, but he kept on coming back. And that's what made him so popular. He was trying to mend a divide. And in his words, he was saying, we need to ensure the debate keeps on happening, because once the debate stops, the violence starts. And I can't agree with him more. I'm going to leave you guys with a little video from George Carlin. Awesome comedian from back in the day. And I think it's quite telling of where we're at these days in terms of our culture. And I'd love to know what you guys think.
Right in the fucking head. Assassination. You know what's interesting about assassination? Well, not only does it change those popularity polls in a big fucking hurry, But it's also interesting to notice who it is we assassinate. Do you ever notice who it is? Stop to think of who it is we kill. It's always people who've told us to live together in harmony and try to love one another. Jesus, Gandhi, Lincoln, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, John Lennon. They all said, try to live together peacefully. Bam! Right in the fucking head.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. And I think we got a long way to go to repair. And I don't know what's going to happen here, folks. I don't have a crystal ball. I made a post the other day that we got to figure out a way to get closer together as a population here, as a civilization. But as a hedge, I'm going to buy some more 30-06 and some 308. Not to say that I want to go do anything. I just want to be well prepared if the shit hits the fan. So that being said, last quote from George Orwell, just to tie things back together to 1984. The further a society drifts from the truth, the more we'll hate those who speak it. That's it for me, folks. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a comment. Make sure to obliterate the subscribe button. It helps grow the show, and believe it or not, helps me feel a lot better about myself doing these things. So let's pray for Charlie's family with two beautiful kids. Unfortunately, they no longer have a father, and let's put an end to the violence and come to a common ground. That's my hope, and that's my prayer. So enjoy the rest of the week, guys. Enjoy your weekend. I hope you have a beautiful one, and train hard, fight easy. See you on the next one. Peace.